So welcome to this week's episode of the Drivetime Podcast, the global auto tech podcast designed to help you understand technology in your business, particularly in automotive, with a number of amazing partners that we work with. This week, I'm joined in the studio by Jane Smith, who is the Chief Data and AI Officer for EMEA at ThoughtSpot. Welcome to the episode, Jane.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's great to be here. This is significantly increasing my kudos with all my petrolhead relatives. So thanks again.
You can keep this up, so you have to put this episode on your Facebook or whatever and you go, here I am.
Absolutely, on my CV. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's really great to have you here. And we're going to spend the next sort of hour just delving into agentic AI. So ThoughtSpot is a world leader in agentic AI. And I think we can just expand out what that means because AI is the hottest topic. And we are now running a series. We've had a mini series delving into AI and data and understanding kind of what we're doing with it and how that affects the automotive industry, particularly for this episode. So just for a bit of background, can you just explain for anyone that hasn't heard of ThoughtSpot what ThoughtSpot does and then your role within it?
I definitely can, yes. So ThoughtSpot, we are the world's #1 agentics analytics platform. I have to say that right, and there's a lot of A's in it. What that means is that we have pioneered AI-powered reporting and business intelligence. So you can ask your questions about your data, about your reporting in natural language, and our AI-powered tool will give you the answers. I think of it, Jackie, like talking to your data and it talks back to you.
I love that. So you're Chief Data and AI Officer. So just explain a little bit about that and what that means, because it sounds like quite an important job.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a great job title. So I'm a field Chief Data and AI Officer, which means that I am a peer advisor to Chief Data and AI Officers in our customer companies. I talk to them about what they're doing. I bring a lot from my experience. I look out across the market a lot so I can see what many customers, sectors, companies are doing. I can see how the market's developing. I myself am actually a former Chief Data Officer of an insurance company, and I've had a long career in data prior to that. If you wanted to put a number on it, you could say 20 years. So I could probably answer that question more simply for you, Jackie. 20 years, a lot of data.
And I think that's really important. So your work is with other data officers, so understanding how to interrogate numbers and how to kind of make sense of those numbers. Because when we talk about, and I think we're going to get more into this topic, particularly because we, obviously Keyloop, we have systems that manage other people's data, and it's how do we then make sense of that data for our customers to help them make the right kind of decisions when they're thinking about their businesses. How do they stock showrooms? How do they predict out what models to build? So I think there's an awful lot that we should delve into and make sense of. So you mentioned your own personal experience in sort of as a data officer in insurance. So what's your kind of your day-to-day in that role? Just expand a little bit about kind of what that means. So you're just like crunching numbers, or just help me understand a little bit about what a chief data officer would do.
A Chief Data and AI Officer, your job used to be quite simple. You used to have to provide all the reporting for the organization, keep the data safe, monetize the data. And now it's quite different. In the last few years, we've seen that role really change a lot. We've seen that Chief Data and AI Officers are bringing huge transformations into companies that will, change them at quite a fundamental level. They'll often change how their organizations are structured, what they do, how they get value as a business. And these are things that have repercussions well beyond the bounds of a data team. So Chief Data and AI Officer now is sort of grappling with many, many different things. It's a very new place to be, but it is, this generative AI boom. It's new for all of us, right? We're all navigating it. We're all keen to partake of it. We're all keen to see how to work with it.
When did you move to ThoughtSpot, by the way? And kind of what inspired you to make the leap?
Only a few months ago, actually, only about 3 months ago, I moved to ThoughtSpot. AI has been around for a long time. We sort of forget that. I think a lot of people now, when we say it's the AI boom, what we mean is generative AI, when ChatGPT exploded into our consciousness a few years ago. But AI, anything that has a computational assist, has been around for a long time. Yeah. But with this AI boom, I felt like I'd built a story at the last company I worked with. The big thing I did was productionize AI. We had AI models interacting with our customers. We had AI models in our back office making us more efficient. And anybody really can have an AI model. It's not that difficult. But when you have a whole fleet of them, when you've productionized them, when you're talking about AI operations, governance that oversees your native AI and ML assets, is quite different. And I thought, I have this knowledge that probably not a lot of people do have, and I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna work across companies, across industries. I'm gonna have this more outward looking focus to my career. And that's where I came to ThoughtSpot. It's a small company with a lot of wind in its sails. It's built AI native search analytics, and I thought this is where I'm going to be.
So just explain, and we're gonna do this a lot, I think, because you're an extremely technical. Your role means that you're very technical, and there's a lot of jargon within your role. So when you say productionize AI, what do you mean by that? If we can just simplify that term for anyone listening that has never heard that term before.
It is a fancy way for me to say lots and lots and lots of AI. When we think of Gen AI, when it started, a lot of companies would have one or two experiments, proof of concepts. They would be trying a couple of different things, but it would be very much in the innovation lab space. It was emerging technology. And over the last couple of years, we've moved away from Gen AI, from being this new thing, this thing we're trying, we're going to see how it goes, to actually, this is how we know to make it work. We're going to expand it to multiple operations, back office, front office. We are going to put proper compliance, governance frameworks, audit ready trails around it.
One of the things that we were talking about before was, how do we then, in terms of productionizing the data, expanding on the evolution of that data into dashboards, and how we can start to move from it's being able to query data in real time, which I think makes it so much more accessible. So most of us are used to spreadsheets and having data in a format that means that you can then query that data. So what does this data tell me? And we would, years ago, I think we had some research when I worked at Bauer, and it would just be like, questions, ones, zeros, lots of numbers. And then it's understanding what those numbers are telling you in terms of trend. And what AI does is it allows you to ask the question of the data using language. So it then translates that into ones and zeros, interrogates the data and brings you back some language. So just to expand a little bit on the evolution of that space, because I think that gets really exciting for anyone that wants to understand what your data in your systems can tell you. It's now a lot more accessible because of the products that people like ThoughtSpot are building, and the way obviously we're working with you to start to unlock a lot of the data that we have in the Keyloop systems as well.
Exactly, yes. And you've summarized it so nicely there, making it accessible. Let me talk very briefly through this evolution. I've seen and lived this evolution. I'm like the elder statesman, aren't I? So, if we think back to early days of analytics, 10 years ago or so, we were very reliant on dashboards. They were configured for us, built for us, created for us, and dashboards were great. You would look at your dashboard every week. What are my sales? What's my churn? And dashboards are great because they answer our questions, as long, of course, as your question is exactly what that dashboard was configured to show you. If it wasn't, we have to lean on our army of analysts. We have to go back and say, well, I'd like to understand this. Can you interrogate this for me? I'd like to know a bit more about this. So you have quite a long time to insight. There's a lot of back and forth to get to what you want. We started to see the market, really moving away and demanding conversational analytics. And at ThoughtSpot, we built this natively about 12 years ago. We started to build this. So when ChatGPT and the concept of natural language search emerged, we were like, oh, great. Hello, this is our moment. But this move to conversational analytics means that instead of a specialist team in a business who are there specifically to interrogate your data for you and make it make sense for you, anyone in the business unit, exec can ask their questions just like you'd ask a Google search, just like you'd ask a colleague, and get your answers back in your natural language too. But we're moving now towards agentic. That will be the next iteration of AI-powered analytics, where we have context-aware assistants that will come to us with insights. We don't necessarily need to ask. When we need to know something, they'll come to us. And then ultimately into this future that everybody's talking about, autonomous. So our agents, they know what's going on, they brought us the insight, and then they start to work on the resolution.
So what you're saying then, if I'm understanding it correctly, Jane, is now with the power of agentic AI, it could say, oh, and hey, by the way, did you know that this has happened? And it's telling you that maybe you're selling more of a particular part than you were before, or you're seeing more of this kind of model, or people are searching more for this kind of product?
I'm going to maybe illustrate, because a lot of what I talked about, the agentic, the autonomous, it's futuristic. We're building for it, certainly in ThoughtSpot. That's our whole business. We are building for it. But let me talk first about today and what's different between that sort of early iteration of analytics and dashboarding to conversational. Now, here's what it might look like. If you are, let's take a dealership, and you have your Monday meeting, your same Monday meeting that you go into, and we have our dashboard, and it says sales were down by 5% last week. And this dashboard, maybe it's a screen grab from the BI tool that you have. I guess our analyst, Kevin, we'll call him Kevin, has spent all Friday putting it together. And you understand that sales are down 5%, but you don't understand why. Of course, we want to know why. So we have to go back to Kevin. And Kevin has to do probably some manual exports. He has to interrogate several different dashboards, different tools. He has to try and get to the why. Comes back in a few days and naturally just leads to a few more questions. So probably Kevin puts the pieces together. We get a good idea of this, but a week later. So we haven't had a lot of time. We've kind of been idle on that. We haven't been able to do a lot to address the 5%. That's the kind of the traditional way. Now, in the era of conversational analytics, it can look quite different. So we go into our Monday meeting, log onto our laptop, and instantly bring up the dashboard. We call them live boards in ThoughtSpot because everything is live, it's real time. And we can see, okay, 5% down. So in natural language, we ask into the search bar some questions. Like, I guess something that would come to my mind is, can you show me this week versus last week by model? And we can see pretty quickly, maybe the SUV sales are up 15%, but hatchback sales are down 40%. So quickly we're starting to get to, okay, I see where the issue is. Then maybe we ask, again, in our words, in our search bar, can you show me by salesperson? But we see all our salespeople, they've all had a pretty good week. Show me by finance arrangement. And then we look for the finance arrangement by that hashback model, and we can start to see, okay, there's a financing arrangement that people weren't liking here compared to a couple of weeks before when there was a different finance arrangement. So within the space of about 5 minutes, we've got to that answer. Now, I've illustrated how you can search in live boards, how you can drill in, you can ask more questions, but we also have AI highlights. So you could maybe see that bar chart that's showing you the 5% drop, and you could switch on the AI highlights and it would probably surface a lot of that for you already. Now, what enables this, Jackie, this sort of traditional way and this new way is, of course, the AI-powered analytics, but almost even more importantly than that, it's the software in the background, right? Mm-hmm. It's the software that is giving you that unified customer profile, so you can see from, the person from lead to sale to aftercare to servicing back to lead, and it's that single view of data that's important, and that's what Keyloop provide, right? That's what you do. Your good data, your good software, and your AI-powered analytics.
We obviously see with retailers is that we have a fairly, it's a very busy partner ecosystem actually, but it means that data can often be not connected. You don't see it all in one place, and I think that's what we want to be able to get to, is that you should be able to query your data in real time, because you just need to put it in a place where it's accessible. So you can just walk in and go, so tell me what happened. Hey, Kevin, where's the data? And why did this happen? So that could also maybe track things like, how does your stock perform in terms of search on marketplaces? So Kevin doesn't have to go back in and look at how each of those ads have performed. You can start to bring it into, and I like Tim, my boss, talks about democratization of data. I think that's what he means by that. So you enable the data to be visible across all platforms, to be able to understand, well, actually, you were priced too high or priced too low in that marketplace. And Nick King from Auto Trader was in the studio a couple of weeks ago. So we've got all of these other touch points that allow you as a retailer to see more quickly how to act on something, which I think is so exciting. But just thinking about other verticals and some other examples of where else we can see this happening in real time if we are a consumer, or because pharmaceutical businesses use this. There's loads of other kind of examples of where we see this happening already, kind of in a much more mature stage maybe.
Absolutely. And this is part of why I love my job. I work across so many sectors. Let me tell you some of the things we're seeing. So I always find big pharmaceutical companies really, really interesting. But we see a lot of our big pharma customers who, in their sales, their go-to-market functions, they're able to, through ThoughtSpot, see exactly where they need to focus. They can see their sales, they can see their churn, they can see where, across all the geographies they operate in, where they need to give attention to things. and I find this fascinating for these behemoth organizations that are just juggling so many different things, especially with something as complex as pharma, with all its moving parts, its regulatory things to take care of. We see also in digital businesses in quite a different sector that are quite fast moving. SaaS businesses, they need to be able to see very quickly what's going on because, especially if you're an internet based business, you don't have a lot of time to get to insight. The internet doesn't work like that.
No, no.
So we've been able to see them move things really, really quickly through what they can, the insight they can get through ThoughtSpot, because the time to see things just collapses. But one example that we love in ThoughtSpot, it's not business, it's the Met Police in London, and this knowledge is all in the public domain, so it's fine for me to say this. But their mission, of course, is very difficult. It is very difficult. It's very different, is what I meant to say. It's to keep people safe in London, and they use ThoughtSpot. It's in the hands of police officers, and they also use it for their planning. An example I love was they used the data that they had from Taylor Swift concerts to plan their policing for Dua Lipa concerts.
That's really interesting, actually. So what they were able to do then was, I suppose, learn from the behaviour of one concert to be able to replicate it and police accurately and safely every other kind of concert that was happening in a similar area.
Exactly. This is what you can do with data, the power of being able to access your data.
One of the things you mentioned, Jane, before was about language search. And one of the things we talked about in the kind of pre-call, you sort of went into detail about tokenized search. And I was really curious, but I didn't understand the term. Yeah. So when we think about how people are searching and asking questions, can you explain what that term means in terms of tokenized search and how AI is playing more of a role in the way that we interact and sort of ask questions of devices and ask questions of our, listening device in the corner or whatever? Just explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so tokenizing is a way to translate words into numbers, because computers, they don't read words, they don't understand them, but they understand numbers. So tokenizing translates our words into numbers, so the machine can read them, give us the output, and translate them back into words again. That essentially is the magic of these LLMs. So when you hear about LLMs and you hear about tokenized search, that's what it means. In ThoughtSpot, we deploy tokenized search very, very specifically, so that you probably heard of hallucinations. No, oh no, oh my gosh, what a bombshell of a word to drop in here. So hallucination is, if you ask an LLM, maybe a ChatGPT or something, it sometimes gives you an incorrect answer, but it gives you very confidently will give you the incorrect answer.
Yes.
That's what we call hallucinations.
Interesting. I haven't heard it called that term, but yes, I've seen that. So you have to fact check it, because if you don't fact check it, it does make stuff up.
Well, you have to be careful. You have to be careful, because, and also if you ask the same question to ChatGPT, immediately ask it and then ask the same question again, any of those LLMs, you will get a slightly different answer each time, because it is what we call stochastic or probabilistic. It is operating in a slightly different way to traditional search tools, which they would return back pretty much according to a set of rules. Now, in ThoughtSpot, for our analytics, we use a tokenized search, which generates a very deterministic SQL, which fetches the output for you. And that's how we know in ThoughtSpot we have zero hallucinations. We cannot have hallucinations. We do not have hallucinations, because we use this very tokenized search. That's why tokenization is an important word in this space. That's why hallucination is important.
We've talked a lot about data so far, and I think we know data has become one of the most powerful currencies in our industry because we have so much of it. So what do you think are some of the most exciting ways you've seen data to improve a customer experience in retail generally? Because obviously we work very specifically in automotive retail, but what can we learn from general retail? Because consumers, we take our experiences from our online shopping behaviour or our general retail behaviour, and that leads us to have an expectation of what we want when we come into market.
In every industry, you deal with a lot of silos, a lot of separation. And for you guys, I guess you'd have that separation of OEM, of dealership, of lender. But to the customer, they don't really conceive that separation the same way, do they? It's one experience, it's one brand. And you can be quite frustrated as a customer if you have to input the same information multiple times, or if you get slightly conflicting emails, slightly different advice, or if you get, super generic marketing campaigns. And all those things happen by virtue of data being quite siloed, quite separated. So what we see in retail that I think is very exciting is when you can bring all that together. You can give a customer an experience that it's tailored to them, it's harmonious, it's non-repetitive, it's the right information at the right time. That to me feels like the game changer. I know that's certainly what you're doing in auto through Keyloop.
I think, like you say, we're building towards that. And I think that takes the way that we work with our clients and the way we work with our industry sort of partners, so lenders. And it's about having that, I think it's having a thinking ahead and having that wouldn't it be great if kind of question, but also doing continual discovery with customers and using data that you have in your systems to see what's working well and what isn't working well. So you're absolutely right. I think when you walk into a showroom with a brand above the door, you expect to have that brand experience. And historically, you've had an inconsistent experience depending on which dealership you've walked into, because some people just do it differently, not better, not worse, just different. I'm going to be very politically correct. But actually, the consumer experience, it can be inconsistent. And we still are faced as an automotive sector with the stereotyping of the car salesman. So you kind of almost go in with your heckles up thinking, oh God, I've got to go through this process again. But there is such an opportunity to get it right if we can bring these things together. And actually, like you say, the consumer doesn't differentiate between the lender, the brand, or the retailer. They expect it to be a connected experience. And I think that's the bit where we're trying to connect up those dots with those three different stakeholders and actually using data and the ability to interrogate the experience by using some of the work that you guys do and the way that you can then interrogate that data using the agentic AI to start to give back this worked, this didn't. So now thinking about how we can start to play with platforms like ThoughtSpot to do more, what should we be thinking about? If we were talking to retailers, or if retailers were sitting here, we could say to them, right, here's how you can start to think differently about how we democratize the data that you have. One of the things that you talked about, Jane, in our pre-call was bringing in world data. So it's not just using the data in your system, but we have access to other data. So just, can you explain, when you say like world data, is that like macroeconomic data? What could you just explain a bit about what you meant by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very new development, really. It's called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, and it was released, I think, in November last year by Anthropic, as in the company that make it, the Claude company. And what they started was this incredibly exciting era we're moving into, because what we're doing is we're moving away from singular large language models, singular agents, to where large language models can interact, they can access other data sources. So at ThoughtSpot, we've actually built an MCP server. So what this means is an MCP, a host, something like a Claude, like a ChatGPT, the large language models, they could reach into another data source, another tool, so something like ThoughtSpot. So for the first time, a company is able to access the structured data, which is all your rows, your columns, your data that's in your database, your tables, your unstructured data. So anything that's written in your PDFs, maybe your notes that your salespeople make in your dealerships, the text from emails, video, audio, that unstructured data that can be brought in together, and then world data, so internet data. So I guess things in your world, it would be things like new vehicle releases, new manufacturer guidelines, new regulatory changes, all these things that you would find in publicly available data sources. So you can ask questions into your large language model, and you can get an answer that is able to look at all three of these data sources. If you're in a pharma company, you could ask a question like, what late stage drugs should I accelerate for development? And you can put all three of those data sources to get a very pointed answer. For example, file early in Japan for this one. If you are in the wealth management business, you might want to ask something like, how would I rebalance my portfolio based on market volatility? I think what matters less is the how and the maturity of it. What matters is that we're starting to see a move away from agents to connected agents. I find that very exciting.
That is exciting. So again, MCP stands for?
The Model Context Protocol. We're great at naming things in this world.
Model Context Protocol. I mean, we have, my sort of previous job before I started podcasting here was I ran the global OEM team, and every OEM has a load of projects, and each of them has a number of different 3-letter acronyms or multiple letter acronyms. Yeah. So you need to almost have we need to have some AI that kind of just translates what all of those projects mean. But they're all big sort of data projects, and a lot of the work that we do in that team is just kind of ingest data from the manufacturers. So we are compliant with their systems to be able to provide that data to their retailers.
Mm.
So we have to certify, in every single OEM in every single market to make sure that we're compliant, because we have a responsibility to manage that data in the way that that's then displayed within the retail space. So that's huge. So how do we see that playing through for an OEM, for example? What would be we could say to any of our OEM customers, we're going to start to help them model out by using some of this analytics, engine, where they could start to, like you say, either accelerate a drug in a particular market or accelerate a model in a particular market, because obviously we operate globally. Some markets are more ready for EVs than others. There are different levels of charging infrastructure. So I think that's probably quite a good use case. So you could see where you would bring a product to market based on the readiness of that market, based on all of those different data sources. Would that be a fair application?
I absolutely love this, because people always say to me, what are good use cases? What are the top 5 in insurance, top 5 in pharma, top 5 in retail? And I say, you tell me. What gets to the heart of your business? What would, even if you increased it by a few percentage points, if you could answer one question, don't think about where the data comes from, because you can take it from many sources, what would really make a difference to your business? Congratulations, you have your MCP use case. And here you've just given me yours, Jackie. So congratulations, you have your MCP use case. There we go.
There is such an appetite to do things better. What we see with our customers is it's a very expensive business. Managing data is expensive. Manufacturing vehicles is expensive. You're relying on, you're employing thousands of people, something like 9 million people work in automotive.
Wow.
From the whole kind of manufacturing of a vehicle. Obviously, there's a lot of it now that's done electronically, mechanically, through robots, whatever. But it still requires a production line and a consumer base. So you've got to manufacture products off a production line, as you would with medicine or with clothing, and you want to get that product into a market that is going to be ready for it and will consume it. Otherwise, you've got wastage. So there's an awful lot, I think, not buzzwords even, but actually there's a requirement to drive efficiency into every business. So how we can start to employ the AI engines to make us more informed and more efficient is going to be game-changing if you start to adopt that in your business. So
absolutely. And we've seen huge operational efficiencies. I come back to pharma a lot. I used to work in the pharma space, but anything with a big manufacturing arm, we've seen huge changes, like in the supply chain, the demand forecasting, inventory management, that really drive those costs down. But I think there's also an element that, for a lot of manufacturers, they've sort of squeezed them as much as they can. They're very, very efficient. And whilst you can drive those costs down, there's probably not a huge difference you can make. Whereas when you look at the marketing, the sales, the commercial side, I always feel that's where the gains are. That's where the revenue potential is, where the cost savings are.
As a data officer, you're kind of used to working in that space and you understand how to kind of unlock the power of that data. So how do we help OEMs and retailers think about what do they need to think about within their data strategy? What could they start to pull together in that kind of, like, we've got a big whiteboard, we're going to start to throw some things out there. What should they be putting on that big whiteboard?
What I'd start with the whiteboard, I'd go for 3 things. I would start with, the business value. What are we all here for? What's important to our business? Where do we want to, all things we do in a business really are to either open up new revenue streams, operate more efficiently, or squeeze more out of assets. That's kind of what we need. So we want to be very clear on that. And then any data and AI decisions we make, tools we buy, strategy we pursue is in service of that. So before we even mention data and AI, we're getting very clear on those things. I know it sounds obvious. You'd be amazed how many data and AI strategies start, well, this is a really cool new development, or we have the chance to do this. So we're not going to start there. We're going to start with business value. The second thing would be, governance. Governance isn't a word that makes people go, wow, but
it's not the sexiest.
No. But in your world, you probably wouldn't open a new factory without knowing who has the keys, who's in charge of the systems. So our governance becomes very important, our single source of truth, good discipline around our semantic layer, so our business logic. Anything, no matter how good it is, can be derailed if something like, I don't know, if customer churn means in sales 90 days inactive, but in after sales it means hasn't logged on or something. We are going to have business decisions driven from a mismatched logic. So that discipline around the data, the metadata, the governance, what are the rules of engagement would be the second incredibly important thing to start thinking through. And now, of course, in the AI era, our framework around AI, responsible use of AI, ethics, all comes together there. And the third thing would be the people. How do we, you mentioned democratization of data, this that wonderful buzzy term. How do we make it easy for people to get data? How do we encourage them to use data? How do we make it so that you don't need a specialized team with specialized skills that need to configure dashboards, run SQL queries, oversee a lot of different silos to get data? How can anyone in the business at any level, exec, business user, type their questions in and get their answers? Those are the three things I would put on my whiteboard.
That's a really good place to start. And I think having the ability to just ask the question, what we see, it was a couple of years ago now, I can't remember who actually talked about it, but it was the future is not having PowerPoint slides. The future is having the ability to query your data. So when you're in the boardroom, how do we enable the board to make decisions in real time?
Yeah.
And it's the ability to query the data that you've got in real time.
On their laptops there and then. We don't need screen grabs. We don't need things put together. We just need to ask. We use in ThoughtSpot all the time. We call our instance champagne, the phrase, you eat your own dog food, you drink your own champagne. We use our own product. We go into meetings and we just bring them up there and then.
Yeah.
So I have no hesitation in blowing our own trumpet here.
But you have to toot your own horn. You have to, but it's like if you're not eating your own dog food, and I love that phrase, it's a technical, so you just literally are testing your own thing. And one of the things that we know as well, most of the people that work in automotive don't buy cars, because if you're working in an OEM, you get car as part of your package. So the buying journey is often not tested. I know.
That's a great point. I never thought of that.
Yeah, no, they do. They don't buy cars. So, and the same with retail, it's you're not going through the buying journey. So one of the main pieces of advice I give anyone is try to buy from yourself and then see where you get stuck. Or ask somebody in your family to try and buy from you and give you honest feedback, so that you can see if someone's going into a retailer, or they've kind of done the research first, where do they have to stop and go to a different site, and then like, oh, I can't find that information out there because I've got to go and do this. And one of the most frustrating sort of processes is like buying a house. It's horrendous because it's just so disconnected, so antiquated. So there's so much disruption that is yet to happen in so many different parts of our world.
That certainly is the hope, Jackie.
So Jane, we've talked a lot about agentic, autonomous. I think we haven't even touched on connected vehicles, which is another area that we can explore, and we're going to do a series about software-defined vehicles and connected. But just thinking about like the agentic and the autonomous, just expand on what you think that kind of means for the automotive sector, and how we can start to be a bit more intuitive in the way that we use data.
Yeah, this is a big question. So agentic and autonomous are words that you hear a lot about, and the answer is this is all in development. There's not a lot that's actually right here right now, but it's for sure it's being built for. I was looking over H1 for this year for VC funding that's going into AI, and it's enormous. It's 53% of all VC funding. It comes to 165 billion US, and the biggest chunk of that is going into the application layer, so the large language models. So OpenAI got a chunk of that. Thinking machines. The second biggest chunk was on the infrastructure, so inference chips, platform. But the third biggest chunk of that VC funding was going on agentic, developing agentic. So went down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but just to sort of set the scene, that agentic is the thing that we're all building for. We're certainly in ThoughtSpot, we are building for it. But let me give you an example of what that might look like and feel like in AI, what we would certainly hope to build for. I think of something like maybe in a dealership, an after sales manager. And I think a question that would be important to her, to him, would be something like, how can I get a forward view of, what might become a maintenance issue or a churn issue? How can I get a forward view of it so I can intervene before the fact of breakage, before the fact of service? Certainly, if I were in that space, that would feel important to me. So when we say agentic autonomous, and I mentioned this earlier, the first thing we'd expect to see would be proactive monitoring. So we would have our agent, and this would be a data agent. I'm going to call it our predictive maintenance monitoring agent, because as you know, Jackie, in this space, we like to be very unimaginative with our titles. And this data agent, essentially, it's scanning loads and loads of different data inputs. So it would be looking at things like service history, vehicle age, what we know about the vehicle from the manufacturers, seasonal trends. If it is a connected vehicle, brilliant. We'd be looking at the telematics data as well. And because this agent, it never sleeps, it's always on, it's always looking, it's able to pick up those signals, those risk factors, and maybe separate into risk clusters or opportunity clusters. And it's able to come up with an idea of, well, these are the vehicles, these are the areas where we think in 30, 60 days, we might have someone who is going to have some dissatisfaction with their vehicle. We have an opportunity to intervene here. So that's the very first thing we see, the proactive monitoring. The insight's going to come to us. And our after sales manager, she's not going to have to go looking for this. She's going to get a very context rich alert. Nobody wants a generic alert anymore, a flag. She'll get something like alerts, vehicle 7654 predicted for early breakwear issues, potentially fail MOT, suggest early intervention. So she's like, brilliant. Okay, this is where I can go, because she's had her proactive monitoring. The second thing we'd see in this agentic autonomous future is sort of cross-system resolution. So a predictive monitoring agent, having picked this up, now starts to interrogate. It would look maybe into the DMS to get the full vehicle profile. It would look into service history. It would look into parts availability. It's starting to get a full picture of what we need to think about. And this is something that I guess today would take more time. It would be conversations. It would look into different sources, some of which are your data sources, some of which are external. But I think where we start to get really cool is, and this is what we're building for, the first steps when I told you about the NCP protocol, what's being built here so the different agents can talk to each other. So our predictive maintenance monitoring agent, we need a different name for it, has surfaced this issue, it's surfaced the opportunity, and it's kicking off multiple agents that now work together. So maybe it kicks off a service agent, and the service agent does something like put together the offer that we'll make to this customer with this vehicle, maybe update the CRM, a pre-filled job card, understand what parts are needed. Maybe an operations assistant will do something like book the time with the technician, whoever needs to do these repairs. An engagement agent maybe will draft a suitable communication for this customer and suggest the right channel. So we could go on, but what you can see is there's multiple agents working together, and we can decide where a human in the loop needs to be. And then I guess what we have the ability to reach out to a customer to do something proactive rather than waiting until something breaks, until they come into the dealership, until they're a potential churn risk. We can get ahead of these things, and the experience for the customer is good. This is where it's going. Now, the predictive maintenance monitoring agent, that's a data agent. That's something like ThoughtSpot would do. But the other ones, probably other providers would build them. You probably build them in Keyloop.
Yeah.
It sort of almost doesn't matter. The point is they can work together. This is the future that is being built for.
We had Max Cavazzini from AWS, and he was talking about robo-taxis. So what you've described there, and my brain's thinking, could you imagine though, so the agent can track, there's some software in the vehicle that can tell you or predict, the predictive maintenance monitoring agent can start to track taking data from the vehicle, which will predict when a part could be an oil line or the brake or needs replacing, or you can sense from all of the sensors that are in those vehicles when that needs to be replaced. With a robo-taxi, the vehicle could drive itself to get there. It doesn't even need a human.
I didn't even think of that.
No.
Absolutely. And I think, that with this telematics data, this is obviously much easier, but you don't necessarily need the telematics data to be able to have the predictive maintenance monitoring agent on it, because they could model based on other factors. They could model on things like vehicle age, known issues, known vehicle failure points. They could make assumptions.
Another really good use case for that, we do a lot of work with a heavy goods vehicle manufacturer,
cool.
And we sort of power the DMS, the kind of the back end of their digital dealer.
Yeah.
And the big sort of metric for them is if you're working with heavy goods, logistics vehicles, uptime is critical.
Yeah.
So how you don't want something to break and your vehicle to be stuck with a payload on the side of the road when someone's paying for that payload to be delivered. So actually uptime of that vehicle, because the vehicle is being, is billable by the mile or billable by the delivery. And we see so many more consumers buying online, having something delivered. So there's a lot more vans and smaller those vehicles are being delivered. They're delivering stuff all the time. So actually the use case for what you've just described there is those vehicles are constantly firing data about the condition of those vehicles to a central source that can then decide whether that vehicle needs to have some work done or not. That's really exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, when you've got a fleet of vehicles, it's something like that is a game changer. We do a lot of work in ThoughtSpot with logistics companies, actually, and some that are platforms that provide data to big retailers, so their
Yeah.
retailers can see the state of deliveries, shipments all over the world. I mean, logistics is a great use case for anything like this.
Yeah, and also fleets and just defleeting as well. So at what point do you then remarket that vehicle, either refinance it or dispose of it, depending on the age, condition, and the ability to then connect the data in with the third-party consumer demand. So again, you've got your MCP use cases. How do we make sure that we put vehicles where they're going to be sold more quickly because you can see the demand based on
Yeah,
search criteria or search traffic?
yeah.
So there's a lot of other dots that we could connect up, I think, with just by employing some of this thinking.
Gosh, you're just churning out the MCP use cases today, Jackie. This is
I
brilliant.
love it. I know I'm going to get let's do some homework. So let's not. So just as we wrap up the episode, Jane, and I know we're going to do a gear change episode, which allows us to dip into some of these topics in a lighter way that gives some listeners the ability to kind of myth bust and also just take some action. And then they can dip into this episode. I will be re-listening. I re-listen to these episodes anyway, because there's so much information from this discussion. Thank you so much for bringing this today. It's been really interesting. And every episode that I record, I'm fortunate I get to do this job. I learn something new and unique from every single person that we speak to.
Yeah.
So just as we wrap it up, I think it'd be really, really helpful just to think about what we can leave our listeners with today. It'd be great.
Always, and I love these little leave behinds or takeaways, because I'm a huge proponent of making things small.
Yeah.
All of us in whatever industry you worked in, for a long time we'd have big 5-year plans, 2-year plans, all the value delivered at the end. And because the space moves so quickly, we can't do that anymore. So I always think just make things really small. So what I would say is, just like you did, what are your use cases? What are the questions that, if you could get answers to those questions, if any people in your business get answered to them without a 2-week wait, would really be a game changer for you, would really change some of your metrics in a meaningful way? Just get a list of those questions, start to think those through. Anybody can start doing that now, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is, who's a key stakeholder? Who's a person in your business that you need to have this chat with now? Is it your, I guess your chief commercial officer if you're in an insurance company? I would always think like, if you're an insurance broker, like the place I used to work, you are probably providing a lot of data to your insurance underwriters. Now, if they are getting a good data experience from the data you provide to them, that's brilliant. If they're not, your competitors are going to lean really hard into that space. So a chief commercial officer is somebody I would always have thought we need to have some conversations about how the space is changing, what the potential is. So that's your second piece of homework. Who's your key stakeholder that you're going to have a chat with? And your third piece of homework is, learn, get into this stuff. So many of these tools are freely available. Just start to play with them, start to see what makes your life easier, and then think how you can apply that to your domain, your line of work, your responsibility.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
what I do, and I often listen to podcasts with my phone, and as I'm my notes application, I just use my notes and I write down questions that I'm inspired. When I listen to stuff, I have to kind of pause and go, oh, I want to know more about that. So 3 homeworks then. Think about your
questions,
questions you need to ask. So as you're listening to a podcast, go back and re-listen, and then note down any questions that you have. Who's your stakeholder in your business that you can go and have this conversation with? And then the third one?
I'm just going to quite quickly go back and refactor on the question. So I think the question is, what questions for your business, if people in your business can ask those questions and you could get answers to those, would really make a difference.
Okay.
So that'd be the question I'd start thinking about. And you've given, I know we call them MCP use cases, but you gave some great examples of questions. Wow, if we had the answer to that, that would make quite a difference. Yeah. So what are your 2 or 3 questions there? You don't need to go to town, just 2 to 3. Who's your one stakeholder that you're going to have a conversation with? You're going to be able to say, this space is changing. We need to maybe think about how it's going to change, what we need, what we're going to do. And the third thing is, get into the tools, use them, play with them. So many of these are freely available. And then think about, whether it's image generation, text generation, video, whatever it is, organizing, starting to pull agents together. How could I use this or think about this in my business domain, in my line of responsibility? There you go. It's 3 things anyone can do today.
I think if I was running a business now, and that's amazing, thank you. I love the play with the tools. Have an AI lunch hour with your people in your business.
There we go.
And just think about, get your people together at every level and just say, what questions do we have? Listen to some stuff, get some information. In the next episode, we're going to highlight some of the podcasts. You mentioned there's another podcast that data officers listen to. So it's a really an extra resource that you can, I mean, I love any podcast where you learn something is useful because you listen to it in your own time and you're constantly able to take information in from so many amazing sources. So Jane Smith, Chief Data and AI Officer for EMEA for ThoughtSpot. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. It's an amazing honour to be able to partner with you to help us unlock our data. And it's great to meet you because I've been looking forward to this episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure's been all mine, Jackie. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Jane Smith for joining us from ThoughtSpot. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and a follow and you'll never miss an episode of the Drivetime Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.